on AU Manufacturing Conversations. Great to have you on the program.
Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm pretty excited to get into what we've been up to in Australia with you.
Excited to learn. The first question is, as it is with all our guests, how did you get here, Joe, and what do you make?
Yeah, so my career path into the space industry and Lunar Outpost has been a bit untraditional, you could say. I actually come from a resources background, so my family worked in oil and gas, and I grew up moving all around the world. I moved back to the United States for uni, went to the Colorado School of Mines and got my undergrad in petroleum engineering, actually. So I worked in the industry for a number of years for primarily a subsidiary of Shell. I learned a lot about resource extraction, management, economics, and the integrated systems and processes that are involved. Eventually, I found myself asking if this was the career path I wanted for the rest of my life, and if in the totality of my career, if this was the highest value add that I could bring to society. You know, to each their own, but ultimately the answer for me was no. But I was still very interested in resources and the consideration that all the resources we've ever used have come from the same place. Everything, energy, fuels, materials, water. Earth has been a closed system for 4.5 billion years. Biological history tells us anytime we've seen a dominant species in a finite ecosystem consuming a limited amount of resources, that species collapses. It's only a matter of time. So naturally, this thinking led me to the field of space resources. So I became fascinated by the high potential and the technological challenges that are present in this field. So I started my master's degree then in space resources back at the Colorado School of Mines. And pretty quickly after that, discovered Lunar Outpost as their leader in the field of space resources. So I pretty immediately started doing everything I could to get involved. Eventually, I joined the team, and now I've been at Lunar Outpost for about 2 years. Now here at Lunar Outpost Oceania in Melbourne, our team is working with the Australian Space Agency to design and develop a lunar rover for Australia's first mission to the moon.
Well, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile. It seems that you relocated from Colorado about May or so this year. Is that accurate? And if so, tell me about leaving home to lead this ambitious little program that you just alluded to.
Yeah, that is correct. So I was currently working for Lunar Outpost and their headquarters in Colorado, but I came out here to really ramp up our operations in Melbourne and set up the office and hire our team. So as I mentioned, I've grown up internationally, so fortunately I had a good sense of what to expect when moving to a new country. But so far it's been excellent. My wife and I love Melbourne. There's really so much to do here. Every weekend we're finding something new, and everyone has been really nice and accommodating. The biggest change is in the US, we lived in the suburbs in Colorado, and now we live in CBD Melbourne. So it's just been a big change adjusting to that city life.
Sure. So you mentioned something of your background, a long-time resources engineer, and your family being a part of that industry. Another sort of going back type question, is the moon a long-time personal interest to you? Were you the sort of kid that looked out his window and thought, that big ball up there, that's fascinating. What is that?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So I have always been interested in space, even though through my initial professional career, I didn't initially go into the space field. I've always been a curious person, and I really seek to understand the unknown, pretty common characteristic you find in this field. So space and the moon always just seemed like such a mystery comparatively. So I've always been fascinated. Unfortunately, as a high school student and going into uni, I didn't see an avenue for myself into the field, however, which I know now is an absurd thought, but I never had anyone that I met that really worked in the field. So it just kind of seemed foreign to me. So one of my personal goals and one of the goals of our consortium, ELO2, is really to try and absolve that thinking in kids and students and illustrate that there's actually many pathways into the space industry and really anyone can be involved. Actually, our consortium, if I can promote real quick, is helping get the Australian public involved by having them help design the regolith and acquisition delivery system for our lunar rover. So ELO2 is kicking off a set of challenges next month that will be called the Little and Big Dipper challenges that will be around designing the excavation subsystem that will be on the rover, potentially. So stay tuned on our website, elo2.au, to follow along with that challenge and really see that anyone can be a part of space.
We'll return to the Little and Big Dipper in a moment, but before we get there, I wanted to know if you had sort of any impressions at this early stage on Australia's space sector, what you've seen of the ecosystem so far, and if anything stands out in terms of strengths or difficulties. I'd love to get your thoughts.
So I've genuinely been very impressed with Australia's space sector so far. The Australian Space Agency is quite forward-looking and advocating strongly for the international space community. In particular, the Trailblazer mission is a partnership with NASA, for example. So they're very willing to cooperate internationally. And despite some of the recent setbacks nationally, the local sector is finding opportunities to commercialize its world-leading research and grow its commercial terrestrial base and develop those space heritage organically here. So the Trailblazer mission aims to collect and deliver regolith to a processing facility to extract oxygen. And with Australia's heritage and experience in mining and resources, I feel Australia is well placed to build a system capable of excavation in these extreme environments. With this being Australia's first mission to the moon, however, the challenge is really in the system to survive and operate in the harsh conditions of the lunar South Pole. That's a newer problem for Australia. But fortunately, Lunar Outpost Oceania's parent company, Lunar Outpost, has designed and developed 2 rovers for the moon that will both be on the surface in less than a year. So we've been able to share the learnings from our team in the US to our team here and build that space knowledge internally. The other major strength I see for Australia so far has been the people. The level of excitement from our engineers and the 500 applicants we got for our initial positions was really, truly inspiring. People have been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. And so we have a range of experience on the team, but a lot of our engineers competed in the Australian and university rover challenges, which have proven to be an excellent, relevant experience for them. And we will be looking for more talent soon. So stay tuned.
I'd like to know how you linked up with your fellow lead partner on ELO2. Tell me about that company, how you began to work with each other and who does what in the relationship.
Yeah, so when we were establishing operations in Australia, we believed a partnership, coming in with a partnership with a well-established robotics company would be well-placed for us. So EPE has vast experience with deploying, operating, and maintaining fleets of robotic systems and rovers, primarily for the defense application in Australia. We found that they had that expertise that could help us as we sort of expanded our operations here. And collectively, as part of ELO2, our role is to support our individual consortium members and enable the success collectively for the mission. So Lunar Outpost Oceania serves as the technical lead for the program, which is a large element. And EP has a lot of experience, again, with operating robotic systems and integrating sensors. So they have great contributions on the technical front. But in programs like these, there's much more than just the technical challenges. And EP is helping a lot in managing those too.
I've had a read of a few articles. I have sort of personally a kind of vague idea of what Lunar Outpost does. Listeners might be a little less familiar, however. Give me an idea, or the audience more accurately, an idea of some of the work you're involved in, some of the services you provide, some of what you're good at, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. So the vision for Lunar Outpost is to enable a sustainable presence in space while improving life here on Earth. So we build autonomous robotic systems to survive in extreme environments, and we do that in a dual use capacity. So while we're developing these space technologies, most notably, we have 2 lunar rovers going to the moon later this year. We also have a payload on board the Perseverance rover operating on Mars today. We leverage a lot of those technologies and bring them back to Earth for near-term benefits to solving real problems on Earth. So to talk a little more about our missions, our first one will be headed later this year to the lunar South Pole. It will be going on an Intuitive Machines Nova-C lander and a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. It will be the first commercial rover to the moon, and it will be the first rover to the lunar South Pole. It will have a series of objectives. One of the main ones is it will have LTE antenna, and in a partnership with Nokia, we'll be driving around sort of mapping the signal strength of the lunar South Pole to understand where we can eventually set up comms relays and comms towers on the LTE network. We'll also be conducting the first sale of space resources to NASA on that mission and have a variety of other commercial payloads. Mission 2 will be several months after that, going to an equatorial region called Reiner Gamma. So this is a region that's been kind of puzzling scientists for hundreds of years. It's got these weird magnetic swirls. The moon has no global magnetic sphere, but it's got these weird local magnetic anomalies. So this is a NASA science mission where our rover will be equipped with various science instruments like a magnetometer. It's going to drive around and investigate these anomalies to try and understand their origins, which will help inform the origins of the moon and potentially the solar system. And as I briefly mentioned, Our existing spaceflight heritage is on board the Perseverance rover on the payload MOXIE. So MOXIE stands for Mars Oxygen ISRU Experiment. It's currently pulling CO2 out of the Martian atmosphere and running it over a high temperature reverse fuel cell process and actually extracting the oxygen out of that CO2. So it's the first demonstration of in situ resource utilization in human history.
Your rover to go with the Australian Consortium to the moon. It's an incredibly hostile sort of place to go around and, roll and have a dig and whatever else you need to do. A lot of demands for design and engineering. I was wondering if you could talk the audience and myself through some of those and how you're addressing those difficulties.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, there are definitely a lot of added challenges with operating a robotic system on the moon, let alone sending a human to the moon. A number of those stem from the difference in the tilt of the moon versus Earth. So the Earth is tilted at about 23.5 degrees and wobbles as it rotates around. That's what creates our seasons. But if you can imagine, the moon is almost a near perfect spinning top. It only tilts about 1 to 5 degrees. So if you're on the lunar north or south pole and you're up on a mountain, there's regions that can have consistent sunlight for months. Contrary to that, if you're down in a valley or a crater, there's regions that haven't seen the sun in billions of years. So you get this extreme terrain environment that's very mountainous, but with that lighting condition, you get these really long shadows and extreme darkness and extreme temperature swings. It can swing all the way from positive 200 degrees Celsius during the day down to, in these permanent shadow regions, to negative 230 degrees Celsius. On top of that, you add very jagged, lofty regolith in a low gravity environment that can be electrostatically charged. You've created yourself a pretty hostile environment for really anything, again, humans or robotic systems. So just enabling the system to be able to survive, let alone operate, comes with a lot of challenges. So you have your thermal subsystem just to manage that heat distribution. You have your power system to manage your power distribution. There's no GPS on the moon, so you need to do all your localization locally as well.
Are you going to have to be working with really special alloys to make some of the parts and special electronics and shields against radiation and other things that enable the thing to not break down where there's no NRMA?
Yeah, so there's a lot of considerations for the protection of the internal systems, particularly the electronics in those extreme radiation environments. Because there's not just the operation on the moon, there's the path to get there, which can vary depending on which Eclipse lander you choose. Some as soon as 3 days, some can be as long as 6 months. So depending on which transit you take can really influence the protection that's going to be required. So we work with a lot of different testing suppliers within our consortium, like ANU has got radiation testing, for example, to ensure that our systems can survive that environment prior to going up.
And is there anything you'd like to say about the manufacturing side of the projects that's interesting and that listeners might be fascinated by?
Yeah, what's really exciting right beyond this being Australia's first mission is that it's also, being entirely designed and manufactured in Australia. And for our consortium, that would be in Melbourne. It's the first time, something of this magnitude has been done. And what we're really trying to leverage is the potential commercial spin-offs of that technology. At the end of the day, we're developing an autonomous lunar excavator. There's a lot of excellent R&D and technology that's going into that that's relevant for commercial markets. So Lunar Outpost Oceania in particular, we want to leverage that. And as I mentioned at the beginning, our vision is to enable that sustainable presence in space while improving life here on Earth. So our goal is to be an original equipment manufacturer for Australia of these highly complicated autonomous systems.
So you mentioned the Big Dipper, Little Dipper, but there's another competition that might be of interest to listeners, and that is, of course, the competition to name the rover. Obviously, some early suggestions thrown out have been Bluey and of course, Rover McRoverface. Do you have a particular preference for a name, or is this a thing you don't really have a dog in the fight in?
Well, yeah, to talk to the competition first, yes, this is a really exciting opportunity for the public to get involved with the program by actually naming the rover that will go to the moon. So individuals or schools across Australia can enter a rover name along with a brief explanation. I think the agency is really looking for something that captures the Australian heritage and the Australian culture. So if you go to our website, elo2.au, or the Space Agency's website, you can find the link to enter. As far as my preference for a name, I'll leave that up to the Australian public to inscribe their creativity.
It's a good answer, although a cautious one. So obviously there are two consortia who are competing to be the best and to eventually build the rover. You're up against AROSE. For whatever it's worth, I'd see more coverage around to do with AROSE. Maybe they have a more active marketing team. I don't know. But by extension, do you see you guys as an underdog in this competition? Is there a healthy rivalry, or are you just sort of sticking to your knitting and getting the job done?
So both consortia are working to the best of their abilities to deliver outcomes for the Australian government. And the ELO2 consortium is 100% committed to and focused on designing a leading edge rover. The challenge for Australia is the lack of space heritage, and in particular, lunar heritage. Fortunately, the ELO2 consortium has that heritage in building 2 spaceflight rovers, both of which will operate on the moon prior to the Trailblazer mission, along with operating payloads on Mars. So ELO2 will be able to leverage this heritage through our exchange of lessons learned from the design and development of the rovers and the actual missions, as well as the standard tools, processes, practices, including flight qualification testing, detailed technical reviews, etc., to build that knowledge base here in Australia. So we feel there is no one better placed than ELO2 to deliver Australia's first lunar rover.
Lastly, Australia is, as you would have noticed, a country where there's a large amount of small companies, some of them quite brilliant at what they do, but they tend to be, I guess, a little obscure as a function of their size. I say that to sort of lead into asking you about companies working in and around manufacturing. And tell me about the team members, supply chain partners you've been able to identify. Has it been a challenge to learn who is good enough, who is perhaps suitable, who is perhaps not? Has it been especially challenging in the Australian context?
No, not particularly. So ELO2 is an excellent consortium made up of 15 different entities, as we've already touched on. Lunar Outpost Oceania and EP as the co-leads. We also have industry partners in BHP, Northrop Grumman Australia, Element Robotics, Inovor Technologies, Sabre Astronautics, CD3D, Titomic, and Vipack. And we also have research partners in RMIT, University of Melbourne's Melbourne Space Lab, University of Adelaide, Australian National University, and the Colorado School of Mines, our only US partner. And then we also have an outreach partner in One Giant Leap. So each consortium member is an expert in their field that collectively covers the challenges and requirements for this rover. So we will be able to manufacture this rover with our partners, in particular the RMIT Space Hub. They have excellent manufacturing facilities that we'll be utilizing, as well as Titomic and several other of our suppliers within the consortium. There are certainly many other suppliers outside the consortium too, but the goal is to develop a lot of things internally to build that knowledge and ensure that this is not only designed, but also built and procured all as much as we can within Australia.
So that's pretty much everything I wanted to ask you, Joseph. But if you have any final words you'd like to share with us, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, I really appreciate the time, Brent. It's been an excellent conversation. Again, for listeners, I'd love for you to check out our website, elo2.au. We've got some really exciting announcements coming up in just the next month. So definitely stay tuned in terms of manufacturing, as well as further ways to participate in the rover design and be involved in space.
Joseph, thank you very much for taking the time. It's been great to speak to you, and thanks for being on AU Manufacturing Conversations.
Thank you.